Most likely all of you have heard the story of the Loch Ness Monster in Scotland. Tonight we're going to talk about that, but also some of maybe the less known lake monsters here in the United States. Actually, there's quite a host, not only in the United States, but across the world.
Canada and Japan seem to have quite the fair share.
And we're not talking about Godzilla, but still.
That's a sea monster.
That's a sea monster. Stay tuned as we dive into more.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Lake-dwelling entities are common in folklore. You know, the Selkies and the Kelpies and the whatnot from ancient mythology. They usually appear similar to sea monsters of the time.
Plesiosaurus seems to be type of common.
Now, the most famous lake monster, we'll have to be honest here, and we're going to talk about it. That would be the Loch Ness Monster.
Absolutely.
Everybody's heard of the Loch Ness Monster. Now, accounts of lake monsters have changed throughout history. Old accounts usually chalked up lake monsters as being horse-like, with the Kelpie especially.
Seahorses.
As we proceed to modern day, our lake monsters changed. They became more dinosaur-like. Everybody kind of gives the plesiosaur-like description for Nessie. The many sightings of lake monsters are said to be misidentifications of existing or more mundane creatures. Giant eels, giant sturgeon. Which, if you've ever seen a sturgeon, and I think we've talked about them on our show before.
They're kind of scary
kind of a monstrous-looking thing. The Greenland shark, which is a very uncommon shark, lives in the cold northern waters, and the things can live forever. I think they live like 300 years or something like that.
And also I found a lot of references of like bull sharks and stuff, which could be...
The giant catfish.
Oh, yes.
I know we've talked about that.
Our classic.
My favorite, literally, this is almost an exact quote, 3 or 4 otters swimming in a line.
I read that last night, yes.
Say that they have a very serpentine look to them, and people have
pesky
literally...
otters.
Well, they say, like, people have literally claimed to have seen a sea monster, and then they go out, and it's just a bunch of otters swimming in a line. I thought it was kind of weird.
Synchronized swimming.
Now, there's probably over 100 commonly reported lake monsters. This is kind of an incomplete list, but I just wanted to touch on some of the more well-known ones. And like we say on most of our podcasts where we have some foreign names, we're probably going to butcher a couple of these. You have Nessie from Loch Ness and Morag from Loch Morar in Scotland. You have the Lagerflot worm in Iceland. I hope I got that one right. Ogopogo, Champ, Mefrer, and Bessie in Canada and U.S. waters. I think in some cases those are big bodies of water that cross the border, so they're kind of shared.
Right.
The Lariasaro in Italy. The Nahuelito in Argentina. The Moiso in Colombia, the Van Golu Canavari in Turkey, which I've seen some video of that one. It's kind of a compelling creature. The Inkanyamba in South Africa, and then specific to America, you have Tahoe Tessie and Flathead Lake Monster in the United States. And then, Eric, you found one that I seem to have overlooked. What was
Peppy?
Peppy.
So from Lake City, Minnesota.
I think we'll get to that in a minute. Now, of course, you're going to talk about lake monsters. You're going to talk about the granddaddy of them all. So I think we're going to start with Nessie. Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands. Nessie is commonly described as large, long-necked, with 1 or 2 humps. Now, you delved into the history of Nessie.
Being the historian, I went back and I tried to find the earliest documented, and not saying this is it, but this is as far back as I found. 6th century, monks had arrived in the area to build a monastery to spread Christianity. A man was sent in the water to fetch a boat that had drifted away that they'd pulled up on the shore. And when he did, what was described in the books written by the monks was a large creature that surfaced and beelined, headed directly for this poor soul, standing in about waist-deep water. Now, in the story, again, you got to remember, especially during the 6th century, very few people could read or write.
Yeah.
But monks, I mean, that was part of their duty is to record the history.
They were educated folks.
I'll say the lead priest, it didn't give a name, but the main priest that was leading them quickly approached the water's edge, and they actually had a sketch of him holding, this is like Dungeons and Dragons type, holding a staff with a holy symbol at the top. Thou shalt not pass, But he commanded the beast to depart and leave the man alone. And drawing in the crosshair, he makes the symbol of a holy cross, and the monster attunes to him, almost like a serpent with a flute, a king cobra.
Yeah.
And, I mean, takes the command and just slowly backs into the lake and lowers himself.
Now, that's not a spell I've seen in Dungeons & Dragons. Command Lake Monster.
Command Lake Monster. Now, again, in the 11th century, there was a man crossing the loch in a small boat. He was recorded to have been attacked by some type of marine creature. However, the sketch resembles that of a bear.
Well, remember now, I said early sightings. Lake monsters evolved over time. Mm-hmm. And that's why part of the argument, obviously, that there is no such thing as a lake monster is that they change and they evolve as we identify them.
Well, this bear was 2 to 3 times the size of what a grizzly bear would be. And it was described its eyes were sparked and emitting flames.
Well, that's different.
I'm not sure what breed of bear that is, but
Lake bear.
This is now believed to have been that of a simple large bear that was also crossing the loch, and probably they startled each other. And the bear supposedly did attack this small boat, maybe thinking it was an easy prey. And then, of course, you had mentioned the kelpie, the water horse. In legends and lore, it's said that it is known to approach humans, especially young children.
Well, I think the idea was to lure them away and drown them.
Basically, it wanted the small child or innocent person to ride them.
Yeah.
And then it would use almost like a music or tone that would be luring, and then take the small children down to their murky depths and death.
It was in the category of a fey creature, so.
Yes, I mean, definitely. Now, Scottish history is riddled with these tales, especially of the children that fell victim to the kelpie. And again, like a lot of the grim fairy tales and stories of that time, possibly it was nothing more than parents trying to keep their children away from the waters, because obviously there's danger. You could slip and fall, kids drown, and that kind of stuff.
That's another thing that I saw, doing my research, is that probably a lot of lake monster tales are sort of remnants of nothing more than a safety message. Stay out of the water. Yeah. If there's no one around.
Kind of goes back to the Krampus thing that we talked about in another.
They're no, don't go in the water. There's a monster that'll get you. I mean, that'd keep me out of the water.
Now, I know you've got a lot of the more recent sightings, but I'll kind of kick us off. In 1933, I believe it was, a new road was put in that literally followed right beside a large portion of the loch. Now, obviously, when this happened, it seemed that the sightings increased by tenfold, and that makes sense. You've got a road that's right there nearby now.
I want to say that what's considered the first modern sighting happens actually in 1870 by a D. McKenzie.
Okay.
He claimed to have seen something wriggling and churning the water. And that's about all it was. It was just a blurb. But
okay.
And then I bump up to 1933, where I have a sighting by Aldi McKay and Londoner George Spicer.
Now, I know
two different sightings.
There was one sighting, and the date escapes me, but I think it was an early one. It included footprints that appeared like a dinosaur or hippopotamus footprint, kind of a rounded foot with 4 toes. That kind of made some sensation. However, it was later proven that it was a fake. It was actually a ashtray made from an elephant's foot. And they thought it was odd because every footprint was the left foot. There was only the left foot that was kind of stamped into the mud.
Horrible monster deformity.
Yeah, bad. If you're going to try to fake this stuff, come on, people. Let's try a little harder. But I had a Mr. Oscar Spicer had one sighting, and he described it as a dragon-like dinosaur. Now, it crossed this road, the new road that I had mentioned that had been put in, and it left a flattened trail, like where it slid down off the bank, if you will, of the vegetation.
And it was apparently carrying some sort of prey animal.
Yes, a small, was it a calf or a deer or something?
What I read just said an animal.
Okay. So. But it crossed directly in front of the vehicle, and then quickly went down into the water. It was described easily as 10 to 15 foot in length with a dark gray skin, which does seem to be a common reoccurrence, a dark gray black skin, with a 4 to 6 foot long neck, had fins that were strong enough and large enough it used it kind of as legs to propel itself across the ground.
Well, slightly before that report was August 4th.
Okay.
Slightly before that, back in May, I have a report from an Aldi McKay, who claimed to have seen an enormous beast with the body of a whale rolling in the water while she and her husband were driving by the lock on this road. Description here, and I'll quote, "The creature disported itself, rolling and plunging for fully a minute, its body resembling that of a whale, and the water cascading and churning like a simmering cauldron." It was very poetic vision there. But yeah, and the similar with Spicer, this is just this huge beast moving across the road. Sort of what skyrockets Nessie into the modern era of monsters would be the famous surgeon's photograph of 1934.
The London gynecologist that took the photos.
It was published in the Daily Mail on April 21st, 1934. It's sort of that classic Nessie picture that almost everyone sees, where it's got the head and the neck coming up out of the water.
Yep. Considered the first solid evidence. And then later confirmed to be a hoax. Yeah, not so much solid.
I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he actually had a vendetta against the Daily Mail and wanted to make them look foolish.
Dr. Robert Kenneth Wilson.
So I believe it's a little piece of wood with just a little head and neck thing kind of put on it.
An early rubber ducky kind of thing.
Designed to just float, so it's just above the water like that. They say if you look at the original undoctored photograph, most people see a cropped version of the photograph. The uncropped version actually shows the shoreline and everything, and it's clear that this creature
kind of puts it in scale a bit.
Yeah, this object's only like 1.5 feet long.
Yeah.
So, again, just purely to embarrass the Daily Mail. If you look online, you'll actually find a website from, I guess, the Scottish Tourism Board or something like that. But it's a whole website dedicated to the tourism of Loch Ness.
Oh yeah,
and the Loch Ness Monster.
Let's face it. I mean, lake monsters add income and tourism to any area.
It's like we've said in our other stories. The Hopkinsville goblins, the Mothman, places that have a monster or something like that. They capitalize on it. Now, as we progress in time, and I didn't get into a lot of detail with a lot of these things because, man, some of these are really
there's hundreds
shady.
of thousands, and
every year there's sightings. Sonar readings of the lake depict strange creatures, strange shapes, people taking photographs, people taking video, and man, so many people fake things with Loch Ness that honestly the early days of the story are way better than the modern tales, and people still go there all the time. Now, there's this new theory that Loch Ness is it's a giant eel that people are seeing, but man, that would have to be a big eel,
And I was talking with my wife, Sarah, about this. I don't know if anybody out there has aquariums and, do the whole fish tank thing, but there is a freshwater fish that's at least advertised under the name of a dragonfish here in the United States.
Cool looking.
Very cool looking. It has kind of like some spine-like features that come up around the neck region.
Well, and it's got like an eel-like shape.
Eel-like shape, a little bit of fins. I have saw pictures recently on the internet of some of those that literally like 20 or 30 people are holding one. It is so large. So, I mean, easily this thing is 20 or 30 foot. Now, I don't care who you are. If you see that swimming and it's fresh water, that could really be a thing.
Yeah.
But, as you said, a lot of the early sightings, I think, are more interesting than some of the newer ones. There was one on January 5th, 1934. A motorcyclist nearly collided with a large creature.
Wow.
1 a.m. in the morning. Can you imagine? Single headlight on your motorcycle, riding along this kind of creepy, dark, foggy lake, and all of a sudden this crazy creature comes across, and he swerves, doesn't wreck the motorcycle, but, nearly loses control. It's a Mr. Arthur Grant. He's a veterinary student. Now, he describes it, interestingly, as a hybrid seal. Or a sea lion. Again, kind of some differences. He parks his bike, lays his bike on the side. However, immediately, this guy's gutsy, pursues the creature. I mean, ditch the bike. I want to know what I saw. He chases it down to the edge of the banks of the lake And immediately this thing just dives in, big splash, churning water. Never got any photos, of course, but kind of an interesting, different, definitely creepy
that would
tale.
Not be something to stumble upon.
Now, during World War II, British military ships were actually based in the Loch Ness.
Really?
Yes. PT boats were basically used just to ferry soldiers back and forth across the lake. Here we have military accounts documented in their journals on a couple of occasions, but one in particular where they describe the ship striking a massive marine creature approximately the size of a whale. Enough that it obviously rocked the boat. Sounded like maybe you'd done some minor damage to it, so I thought that was interesting. One, I didn't realize the British military had any type of setup there, but obviously they did. And we mentioned the most popular photograph, literally the little, I call it the rubber ducky picture.
Yeah.
Now. But second, I think would have to be the October 1959 photo with the Ararat Castle in the background, where you can see Nessie and then the castle. It's taken at a large distance, so you're able to get some scale. A lot of research has been done on this. It shows two possible humps and leaving a very distinguished wake or a trail behind it. Black, dark in color, and in the picture, the tower is 46 feet in height, and so you can easily scale that, kind of lay it on the side. The creature is 30 to 40 foot in length, so that was kind of another one. And if you're doing image searches, that's probably going to be in the top 2 or 3 for sure.
Yeah. Well, and there's always the underwater photo of the flipper that everybody seems to go back to.
And that was a large flipper, right?
Yeah.
That was, it's like 5-6 foot, they felt.
Yeah.
Murky waters, of course, so it's still kind of sketchy, but very plesiosaurus type.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if there's going to be a place where plesiosaurs remain, let's pick one of the coldest places that we can find. So
now, it's also been a long rumor that not only the loch, but many of these lakes originally were salt water. The water levels were higher. Possibly something got trapped, stranded.
And the potential for underwater caves that still connect to the ocean.
Very much.
Well, we talk about Nessie. Let's go to one of the more famous North American lake monsters. I want to talk about Champ from Lake Champlain.
I'm going to let you have this one.
So this is a body of water that's shared by New York, Vermont, and Quebec, Canada. So this is one of those U.S.-Canadian lake monsters. There were over 300 known sightings of Champ over the years. And supposedly one of the first to spot the beast was French cartographer Samuel de Champlain, who
the name is derived.
Yeah, namesake of the lake. And he was the first supposedly spotted the beast in 1609. And we'll jump up a few years to 1883, as Sheriff Nathan H. Mooney claimed to have seen a water serpent about 110 yards from the shore. Said he could clearly see round white spots inside of its mouth, and said the creature was probably 25 to 30 feet in length. In 1887, I do like this, you'll enjoy this, P.T. Barnum offered a reward.
Oh, yeah.
For anyone that could bring him the monster. I don't think he ever had to pay out for that one.
Don't think he had to. I don't see, he often fished, no pun intended, for those type creatures to add to his.
P.T. Barnum does pop up in a lot of stories that we cover.
Yeah.
It seems like. Now, there was a video taken in 2005 by fisherman Dick Affelter and his stepson Pete Bodette. And the images show what may be the head or neck of a plesiosaur-like animal, or possibly a fish or some sort of eel. It's very it's not high quality video.
Right.
I didn't personally find it, so I don't know exactly what it shows. Now, FBI forensic analysis does say that it appears to be authentic and unmanipulated, so it's not photoshopped or anything like that.
Just a photograph in haste that's not super clear.
We do have a unexpected sort of potential confirmation that there is something unexplained in Lake Champlain. Recordings made by the Fauna Communications Research Institute in 2003 as part of a Discovery Channel program did record sounds which were similar to that made by the beluga whale or dolphin.
Interesting.
Now, Lake Champlain is not known to have either of those creatures as
whales.
Native, to those waters. So, there's something in the lake that makes strange and unusual sounds that isn't supposed to be there. Now, we talked about cashing in on the popularity of your lake monsters.
And who wouldn't?
Port Henry, New York has a giant model of Champ and holds Champ Day on the first Saturday of every August.
Champ Day.
Which would fall mighty close to my birthday. So,
ooh, possible birthday present coming up.
And then Vermont's single minor league baseball team is the Vermont Lake Monsters. So
very nice.
They cashed in on that.
Let's dive into another lake monster, the Ogopogo.
Okanagan Lake.
Now, this is the British Columbia, Canada area. The lake itself is over 10,000 years old, and it was created, they believe, when melting glaciers melted into the valley. It's near a city, I believe it's pronounced Kelowna. The lake is documented to be over 800 feet deep in some places, 2.5 miles wide, and something like 70 miles in length. So we're talking a big, vast body of water.
Yeah.
Most of the sightings seem to be, again, a plesiosaurus type, similar to the newer sightings of Loch Ness.
If I could.
Yeah.
I'd like to touch on some of the First Nations folklore here.
Ah, yes.
The First Nations folk, they called it the Naitaka, which kind of an evil supernatural entity with great power and ill intent is the way they describe it. Closest translation of the name is either water demon or water god, and supposedly it demanded live sacrifices from those that crossed the lake.
I read that as well.
One of the tales is of a visiting chief Timbasket, and he rejected the tradition of the sacrifice.
We ain't gonna make no sacrifices.
Upon entering the lake, Naitaka whipped up its tail and created, like a whirlpool kind of situation almost that sucked the canoe and its occupants to the bottom of the lake. So
I also read they were crossing horses during that time frame.
In 1855, settler John McDougall claimed that his horses were sucked into the water, and nearly the canoe that he was in if he had not cut the line that was tied to the horses. So, yeah, I mean...
Now, some of the horses at least did make it. They had bite and claw marks noted.
So this goes back, a long time ago, and the native people of the area, they believed clearly that there was something that resided in Lake Ogopogo.
Now, along the lines that we've mentioned that, if you have a lake monster, let's capitalize on it a little bit. We've kind of pulled away from that into now more of... Ogopogo monster is now more of a peaceful, playful, inquisitive. You'll find little statues and stuff in the parks, never attacking humans. So, possibly it's been civilized a little bit through the years.
I think we try to tone down our scary monsters.
I did think it was odd that the Ogopogo, is generally related to as a he, a male version. But the native people do believe, obviously, there has to be more than one. It would make, sense to reproduce. Now, there's an area near Kelowna, the city, called Pebble Beach. And recently, a lot of studies and photographs have been taken, and they found a strange orange salamander-like creature that seems to be exclusive to this area.
Huh.
Now, to put it in perspective, the salamander is generally the size of most salamanders, maybe 8 or 10 inches. But there are some people that believe that these are simply the babies. And there is a large Ogopogo orange salamander-like creature.
Is that like the little tiny octopuses that were found? And then,
yeah.
They were the children of the Oklahoma octopus?
Yes. Now, they've taken some pictures, and they're showing what they believe are nest sites, which I'm going to be honest here, and I don't mean to offend anybody. It looked like a pile of washed-up logs and debris. However, these small orange salamanders do seem to be around that. I would say probably because of shelter and, use what you've got.
Yeah.
But many of the occurrences seem to show different sizes. They vary generally about 18 foot. However, some sightings have been as much as 80 foot in length, with flippers over 2 foot in length.
I think modern accounts usually place it around 40 feet.
Yeah. So a big, wide variance.
In the 80s, there was a local tourism agency that offered a bounty.
I read that.
The beast. I think Greenpeace stepped in and said, "Well, if it is here, then it's clearly endangered, and you can't kill it.
You can't do that.
So you have to film it, not capture it."
Now, I come across an interesting story of a gentleman. His name is Bill Stychek, I believe is how you pronounce it. Now, he's a long-term native of the area, and he had his first sightings in the late 1970s, and he is now a declared Ogopogo researcher.
Now, see, how do you get a job title like that?
I think he just created.
I am what you call a team leader at my job, At no point am I a Bigfoot researcher or an Ogopogo expert.
But I'll beg to differ. You're a semi-professional podcast announcer.
Okay, we can add that.
We could do that. We'll add that to our resume. But ironically, he was crossing a bridge, and he pulled off his vehicle because he saw this large creature with multiple humps swimming alongside parallel the bridge in the late 1970s. And ironically, he said, I stopped the car. I didn't even totally pull off the bridge, and obviously other cars had to stop. He said, I was soon joined by as many as 40 people that witnessed this large creature kind of playfully in the water. Now, later on, as he was a declared Ogopogo researcher, he decided he was going to make a short film documenting his first account. He'd asked his son to play the role of himself, because obviously he's much older now. And they had about 14 people on the set, and they're at the same bridge.
Now, I'm going to guess that by coincidence, they managed to have another sighting that day.
You guessed it. What's the chances? Literally splashing in the water, almost the exact location. A dark-skinned creature with humps was playing, possibly feeding in the water. The 14 people obviously were there. They turned the cameras, which they were there filming, and caught this alleged real-life event
that's
going on.
That's just dumb luck.
They should have went and bought a lottery ticket. Sure. Now, Bill later took divers down in the lake. This would be in early 2000s, and did document and film some very sheer drop-off bluffs under the water and many, many caves. There were some of these caves that had so much water flowing out of them at so much pressure that it would churn and turn the divers. There was no way they could even get in the cave.
Wow.
So obviously we've got some cavern systems going on.
Well, and that could go back. We've talked about the native beliefs of those underwater caves and the creatures that can travel.
Now, some might argue possibly the creature or creatures is traveling through the caves, but most all these creatures seem to have to surface for air, but you could also argue, well, there's air pockets.
Well, I mean, what, a sperm whale can dive for 45 minutes or something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, some of these creatures that are accustomed to diving, they can hold their breaths for a long time.
Now, another thing that they did find, and again, this goes back to Bill Stychek. He documented this, and you got to respect this. While he was underwater, he noticed that there's a natural phenomenon where methane gas, especially at the bottom of some lakes, causes that bubbling, churning water to come up. And he recorded some of that.
I think it's actually part of the explanation for the Bermuda Triangle. It's been on Mythbusters. They actually showed that the churning like that can cause boats to sink. So
kudos to him. He is showing at least some other explanations. Whether you believe or not, that is obviously occurring.
We're going to travel to Montana to Flathead Lake.
Alrighty.
And the imaginatively named Flathead Lake Monster.
Very appropriate.
So the Flathead Lake Monster also exists in native legend. The first native tribe in that area was said to have lived on an island in the middle of the lake. And one winter, while crossing the ice, two girls saw some antlers, about 2 feet in length, protruding through the ice.
Interesting.
Now the girls decide they're going to cut these antlers out of the ice, and they're going to take them, because that's a neat trophy. They want to keep them.
That's cool.
So using sharp-edged rocks, they start chopping at the ice around the bottom of these antlers. Well, as they do, whatever's attached to these antlers kind of wakes up. The ice splits open, and the head of a great beast comes out of the ice. Now the girls, and here's where it takes a little bit of a turn for me, they use their powers to transform into a ball and a buckskin to escape the monster. Now, half of their tribe was not so lucky, and that is supposedly the reason why there are so few of the Kootenai people left. The Flathead Lake Monster just drowned them all by in the
one
in the
tragic
lake.
Event, or over a period of time,
just all at once.
Oh wow!
But apparently the Kootenai people, they still lived around the lake. They revered the lake. They considered that their ancestral home. So now the first reported sighting is in 1889 by Captain James C. Kerr of the Lake Steamboat U.S. Grant. He and his passengers, which there were about 100 on the boat, saw what they described as an unusually large whale-like object in the water, with one passenger taking a shot at the creature and sending it diving for safety. Now, the locals have, again, named it imaginatively Flessy.
Flessy.
So,
I like that.
Just take the first letter of your lake and slap it onto
Apply.
Essie, I guess.
Stamp and apply.
But they still have about 1 to 2 sightings per year at Flathead Lake. Now, what they describe nowadays is usually a large eel-shaped creature, round with a wavy body like that of a snake, 20 to 40 feet long, brownish to blue-black skin with grayish-black eyes. Some people also describe it as looking like a whale or even a giant sturgeon. So
Here's the whale reference again.
well, and talking about sturgeon,
Yeah.
again, that's a big old monstrous fish. One of the better stories, kind of like Ogopogo there, one story does relate that a 3-year-old boy fell in the lake. His mom found him standing on the shore, soaked head to tail, and asked how'd you get out of the lake? And he said, well, the flathead monster lifted me up. So maybe the monster's not all bad.
Right.
If you don't go chopping at his antlers, he'll help you out.
It is interesting, you see a lot of the medieval drawings of sea monsters, lake monsters, and some of them did have like deer or antelope type.
Yeah.
We seem to have got away from that in more modern technology. Interesting. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about Pepe. Pepe comes from Lake Pepin, appropriately named, Lake City, Minnesota. Now, that happens to also be the birthplace of water skiing. I thought that was interesting. Now, Lake Pepin is crossed by the Mississippi River. It's been a very long time water route for hundreds and hundreds of years. They have picked up very recently giant sonar readings, still to this day, semi-common, of something 30 to 40 foot in size, they believed.
It seems to be a common length for lake monsters, 30 to 40 feet.
They have had divers that have ran into something beneath the waves. Now, again, we have the native Indian tribes. They also, here's the reference of 40 foot again. They describe and document a giant 40-foot snake-like serpent. So again, kind of going back to this dragonfish or giant eel possibly. Many of the skiers have been brushed, touched, or toppled over as they're being pulled by a boat.
Now, as someone who has swam in a lake with murky waters, I got to say, anything touching you,
that's creepy.
Get
me out of here.
Don't need that.
Get me out of here now. Again, some of these talk about a 6 to 8 foot neck that can come up out of the water. And something unique we're seeing here is of it catching birds eating on the surface. So that's kind of weird. Now, this beast was terrifying to the natives, to the point that the natives often stayed away from the lake. Only a very few of the bravest people would go and fish the lake. They seriously, they were fearful of their life. Again, we're going to go back to clergy and priests going back hundreds of years. They have documented the creature back in the early 1800s. And in their notations, they describe it larger than a rhino, but smaller than an elephant. That's pretty precise.
But that's also sort of an
open...
forgive me, but that's sort of a strange measurement system to use.
It is. Let's put some feed meters, something on there. I will say that in the 1800s, it seemed very common that most of the lakes in the Wisconsin and Minnesota area all seem to have their own lake monster. Now, for whatever reason, it seems that most all have either evacuated, died out, except for Pepe. Pepe seems to have made a stake and staying there.
Well, good for him.
Huge splashes are very common in this lake, similar to the Loch Ness, this slender neck that I've talked about. A couple really interesting ones I want to share. A story of Adam Shimbino, I believe is the way you pronounce his name. This goes back to the 1970s. Teenager years, he and his sister and a group of friends, young adults, were out skiing in the boat. Sis is being pulled back behind the boat. The guys are up front, they're talking, and all of a sudden they hear her screaming, yelling. They circle that she's toppled down into the water. She's splashing frantically. They turn the boat to come around and get her, and she swears that something large, black, and smooth skin come up and touched her body like twice.
Ugh.
And she obviously wanted out of the water, as who wouldn't?
Who could blame her?
To the point that she has been frightened. She has not returned to ski or even be on a boat in that lake today, from the 1970s.
Man.
A pursuit of the Pepe monster. There's a gentleman by the name of Larry Nielsen. Now, he owns a replica paddle boat ship that actively searches for Peppy, and he does tours still to this day.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Paddle boat, they sort of churn the water and make lots of noise. Doesn't seem like the best ship for that job.
Probably not. But he supposedly came across some old manuscripts that originally sparked his interest in the creature. He also offered a $50,000 reward for anyone who could help prove that the monster really existed. Now, he didn't ask to capture it or injure it, just get me photos, get me something, definitive proof. The reward is still active today. Many national television, radio stations picked up the story when he started this, as far as Japan and China, Australia, and even Sweden. There's a big interest for this type of stuff, obviously even outside the United States. It is believed by him that possibly this is a bull shark, sturgeon, or giant catfish. One particular sighting is splashing out of the water, like not the neck, but jumps up out of the water and catches a flying bird and then dives back down. That almost sounds like a shark or
shark-like.
Shark-like. Going with this $50,000 reward, there is what I'll call the close encounter. This is in the summer of 2008, so not too awfully far ago. A group decided they were going to claim this $50,000. So a group of teachers, local scientists, and some scuba divers, they decided we're going to make a documentary film, and we're going to prove that this works, and we're going to pay for the film with the $50,000 reward that we're going to get. Hey, sounds like a plan.
That's some weird circular.
So they're diving into the murky waters here, the Mississippi, where the lake, where it feeds into Lake Pepin. Sure enough, they picked up on this huge sonar reading again, something they describe as about 50 foot in length, cone-shaped, and at the widest point being 6 foot wide. So pretty precise.
That's kind of weird, though.
In over 15 years of using this particular sonar reading, the group said they have never experienced anything in any of the local lakes to this size, and it was only at a depth of about 25 foot deep in the water. Scuba diver immediately dove down in, hoping to get this footage.
You're going to pardon the expression, but that takes some balls.
That takes some balls.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah. There it is. Stop the boat. I'm diving in.
I'm jumping in after that monster.
So about 10 to 15 minutes into the dive, he's getting comfortable and kind of getting familiar with the area. Obviously, it's only 25 foot deep water. He reaches the bottom pretty easily. And all of a sudden, he noticed there's no fish. The fish that were there 10, 15 minutes ago have vanished. He describes it as getting very quiet. There's no sounds at all.
Well, it's like when you're out in the woods and
you feel you're being watched and, kind of that creepiness.
I can't imagine how bad that'd be underwater.
Then all of a sudden, he sees something in his peripheral vision that churns the mud in the water at the bottom to the point it spun him and flipped him over into the bottom of the lake. He immediately was trying to surface. His regulator, the breathing device, was knocked out of his mouth. He is so frightened, this thing comes back and hits him as he's trying to surface, frantically clawing his way to the top of the water, regulator hanging out, bubbles coming everywhere. And, of course, the boat's up here trying to, they have radios and everything. And they hear him trying to gurgle, scream, and everything, so they're not sure what's going on. Immediately, they see the bubbles coming up, and he swims to the boat. Get me out. So, they're able to panically, he's struggling. They pull him in. The underwater camera was used, but due to the murky, muddy water, all they got was churned, muddy water.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, nothing visible.
So I hate to say, smooth black skin seems to pop up a lot.
Yep.
And we've talked.
Yep.
Giant catfish.
Smooth
black skin.
This is the mention of bull sharks. Bull sharks have been fished out of this area. Obviously, they shouldn't be native to that area.
Well, a bull shark, and I might be wrong, I believe is fairly unique in the fact that it can survive in freshwater and saltwater. It has an organ in its body, if you will. It may be the wrong phrasing, but it can actually regulate the amount of salt that's in its body. If it gets in high concentrations, it can increase or decrease accordingly so that it can survive.
All right.
I mean, all the way up to at least St. Louis, they've been in the Mississippi River, so it's plausible that anything connected to the Mississippi could have one.
I believe it was in the 1990s, a 6-foot bull shark was actually fished out of this exact area in this exact lake. So again, it adds some credence to it. Now, the last expedition I came across was in 2012, but again, there was no real results. However, as they were doing the documentary and filming for the 2012 research, they would stop and ask boats and fishermen that they passed. And it was ironic because, like they said, 90% plus of everyone they interviewed definitely believe there is something that is there. And most of them had firsthand accounts. So, do you have a local lake and possibly a monster living nearby? You will not be alone. There's hundreds of these accounts.
All over the world.
Everything from possible bull sharks, dragonfish, eels, shark-like, plesiosaur creatures.
Things with antlers, things with horns,
antlers, hippopotamus, elephant-like, you name it. Anyhow, we hope that you've enjoyed yet another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway podcast. Thank you for your continued support. Would like to give a shout out to our first paying sponsor, Raven's Loft. That's our family shop here located in Lebanon, Missouri. It's your one-stop gaming, vintage toy, and collectible shop where you can find Star Wars, Transformers, G.I. Joe, comics, vinyl records, role-play gaming, Magic the Gathering, and so much more. We're located here at 223 West Commercial, downtown Lebanon, and also in our second location, also here in Lebanon at the Heartland Antique Mall. We'd like to thank Raven's Loft for, again, supporting Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.